Hey, I'm back, and today we're finally going to talk about Ben 10 Omniverse. I've been wanting to do an Omniverse video for a very long time. In fact, I had one recorded and ready to go, but the audio was just really terrible. I know this audio isn't much better, but trust me, you do not want to hear that video's audio. I would like to someday do a full review of all of Omniverse, but for now, I simply want to focus on 3 episodes in particular. And as you probably guessed from the title of this video, those 3 episodes are The Rooters of All Evil, Weapon 11 Part 1, and Weapon 11 Part 2. Or, as these episodes are better known as, the Rooters Arc. For those of you who don't know, the Rooters Arc was a 3-part arc in Omniverse that changed a very famous and well-known character's backstory. So as you can imagine, fans pretty much hated it. And to be fair to those fans, it did retcon a lot of what we previously knew about this character. The character whose origin was changed the most was Kevin 11, a character who up until now we had believed to be an alien-human hybrid, but in actuality was revealed to be a mutant all along. While that change may sound really strange to you, it's actually more justified than people give it credit for. And in this video, I hope to explain why I think the change was for the better, and to hopefully convince some people who aren't a fan of the arc that it was better than they thought. But first, before we get to why I love this arc so much, I want to talk about the few complaints people have given to it over the years. They all kind of boil down to one big complaint: retcons. And as anyone on this channel knows, I too hate retcons, and I want to talk about why I think these ones are not nearly as bad as people make it out to be. So one of the first big problems people have with the show that I think is a little unfair is Kevin's dad. See, for a long time it was believed Kevin's dad was a partner of Grandpa Max's, who tragically died when trying to stop a criminal known as Ragnarok. Well, in the Rooters arc, it's actually revealed that Proctor Cervantes, a being who possessed the ability to give false memories and manipulate minds, actually fabricated that memory so Max would keep an eye on Kevin. The main issue people have with this is that it wasn't just Max who had those memories. See, Kevin's mom and stepfather also had memories of Kevin's dad being a plumber. Now, I don't really see a problem here, as it's not unbelievable that Cervantes brainwashed Kevin's mom as well to keep the fake memories there. Remember, the whole reason Kevin got those fake memories was so he can inadvertently get closer to Ben without realizing it. Kevin wanting to become a plumber to avenge his dad automatically brings him closer to Ben, someone who was very close with the plumbers since his grandpa Max is one. So it makes a kind of sense to give Kevin this memory of his father dying tragically so he can one day rise up and avenge him as a plumber himself. And naturally, if Kevin remembers and thinks that his dad is dead, his mom would have to as well, or else she could one day tell him, and that would jeopardize everything. And finding Kevin's mom really isn't that hard, so I doubt Cervantes would have any trouble there, or any qualms about changing her mind as well. So yeah, Kevin's mom and stepfather also having fake memories isn't a big deal, as it's not a super far leap for Cervantes to have changed their minds as well. But one thing this does kinda complicate is the Ragnarok episode. In the season 3 episode Vendetta, we learn of the man called Ragnarok, who is believed to have been the person who killed Kevin's dad before the Rooters arc retconned that. Now, on the one hand, it is an easier explanation to say he was also brainwashed, since he was literally in the null void where Proctor Cervantes had set up shop, and Cervantes had access to all plumber records and information, and could erase any minds that questioned him and force them to obey him. So, him getting to Ragnarok and changing his mind isn't unbelievable either. In fact, it's even more plausible than Kevin's mom and stepfather knowing. The problem I have here, however, is that Ragnarok is innocent of killing Kevin's father. Like I said, that was a fake memory. So, because of that, it means that when Kevin murders Ragnarok at the end of the episode, or rather lets him fall to his death because of his own machine, it's kind of not okay. Like, Kevin just lets an innocent guy die over something he didn't really do. Now, the explanation I've heard that the writers have given for this is that Ragnarok was on Cervantes' payroll and was willingly keeping up the front of Kevin's dad having been killed by him without Cervantes' influence. So I guess by that logic, he kind of did deserve it, making a kid think that he was a horrible, cruel murderer just to keep up some ploy from some other guy, but it still detracts from the overall story told in Vendetta. So I suppose this is a more fair critique, but again, this isn't the first time the series has thrown crazy retcons. Again, we don't need to get into what Alien Force changed from Classic in this episode. So for now, I'll just say that while yes, this is a fair critique, and I don't blame people for feeling this way, I also can't say that it majorly detracts from the Rooters arc, because like I said, the explanation given in the Rooters arc of Kevin's dad not having actually been killed by Ragnarok still holds up, even if the episode where we learn this information in doesn't, thanks to the Rooters arc. And now on to the final retcon people have a problem with, Agrigore. Agrigore was meant to be a part of the same alien race Kevin was initially, and even referenced their laws and ways, and even mentioned the planet where he came from, Osmos 5, which now, thanks to the Rooters arc, no longer exists. Honestly, this is a change that I honestly don't get why people complain about. The only thing we know about Osmos 5 is that their laws don't let their people absorb energy because it makes them crazy. That's it. We never went to the planet, we never saw it, it had no story significance beyond being called as Osmos 5. So I really don't care that the planet doesn't exist anymore. As for continuity problems, this also really doesn't come into effect here, as again, we never saw Osmos 5, and nobody else had been down to that planet to actually see it, not that we know of, besides Agrigore, who, I do want to point out, was originally supposed to be revealed to have been a clone of Kevin. That's right. The Omniverse writers did actually have a plan for Agrigore and how to explain him away, but unfortunately Omniverse got cancelled before this could happen. This is actually one of the better retcons in Ben 10, which is kind of the reason why these retcons and problems don't really bother me as much when I watch the Rooters arc, because Ben 10 has had tons of retcons throughout the years, and these three were honestly some of the easier ones to explain away. Cervantes probably just brainwashed everyone is a very simple explanation that to some might sound over the top and cartoony, but remember, Cervantes is a cartoon villain, and more importantly, it seems like he would be dedicated to doing this. He was very careful not to let any trace of Kevin slip, even having Max's memories change so we could keep an eye on him throughout the years in case he ever needed him again. So him influencing events throughout his life really doesn't surprise me, and makes more sense than I think people give it credit for. And also, one of the big things I want to stress here is unlike Alien Force retcons, these retcons really don't ruin that many of the original stories. Like, the Agrigore arc still happens and is still impactful, even if Agrigore isn't technically an alien Osmosian. The only exception is obviously Vendetta, and even looking at this from a solely objective lens, taking my opinions and everyone else's aside, it's important to note that the reason these retcons are here is to fix errors that Alien Force and Ultimate Alien Force caused when they gave Kevin his new backstory. The big error it fixed was the reason why Grandpa Max never recognized a kid named Kevin Levin who could absorb energy was the very same kid of his partner Devin Levin, who died tragically, who you'd think he'd care about a little more, and not call a monster in one episode of Classic. It's because Cervantes actually planted that memory, and it wasn't originally there during the Classic series. Another thing the Rooters arc fixed was the really weird retcon in Alien Force, where it was revealed that Plummer's kids had powers because their parents were aliens. Like, apparently Alan can become a heat blast because his dad was a heat blast. Now listen, I don't mean to get too graphic here on this YouTube channel, but I don't think I need to explain to you guys why a heat blast can't have a kid with a normal human being. Like, at all. I hope the answer is obvious to some of you, because I'm not going to explain it from there. And I can already hear some people in the comments saying, but A10, you don't like Alien Force's retcons, so why are you okay with the Rooters arc retcons? It sounds like you're being a hypocrite here. And to that, this would be my response.
No need to be so dramatic!
Alright, I'm sorry, I just really wanted to use that clip for some reason. But in all seriousness, this is a fair point to make. Like I said earlier, I don't think these retcons necessarily take away from the story being told in the Rooters or the previous stories. And while I understand thinking I'm a little hypocritical, because admittedly while recording this, I did find myself going back and wondering, Am I being unfair to Alien Force here for making a big deal of its retcons? The answer I think is twofold. On the one hand, I genuinely think Omniverse's retcons weren't as big a deal as some of Alien Force's. Like, Alien Force changed the entirety of Kevin's character, his backstory, and a ton of other stuff on top of that. The biggest one I just want to point out real quick is how the Plumbers went from a top secret government organization to an intergalactic police force somehow. This retcon actively made seasons 1 and 2 of Alien Force's story make less sense, because how can the hybrid secretly be invading entire worlds without the Plumbers knowing? This either makes the main police force in this universe totally incompetent, or just straight up unaware of the bigger things going on within their own universe. And I don't know which explanation is worse. Had they just left the Plumbers as a secret government Earth-based organization, it would make far more sense why they weren't able to combat the hybrid effectively and why Max was going on an undercover mission to try and stop them. This is what I mean when I say the retcons take away from the story in Alien Force. Because now the story actively makes less sense, the universe as a whole makes less sense, and narratively this change didn't add anything. And that's really the key, I think. And my second point, adding something. Like I mentioned before, the Rooters arc fixes problems that the Alien Force and UAF retcons caused, so it adds something to the universe, even if it does also subtract something as well. And the biggest change it added that I think really saved this franchise and this arc in particular was what it added to Kevin's character. And with that, I think it's time we segue on to part 2, Kevin's character and how the Rooters arc finally fixed him. Trust me, even if you still hate the retcons, I think you're gonna be convinced with this part. But first, before we talk about what the Rooters arc fixed about Kevin's character, let's go over his backstory one more time again, real quick. At the beginning of this video, I told you that up until now, the fans believed Kevin to be an alien-human hybrid, which is what gave him his powers and abilities. Up until the Rooters arc, where it was revealed he had been a mutant the whole time. Well, that's not entirely true. See, in the classic series, all Kevin really says about his powers was that he was born with them, leading many to conclude that he was some sort of mutant. Here's the exact scene for you so you know what I'm talking about.
So, how'd you get your power?
I was born with it. I'm like an energy sponge. Motors, air conditioners, lights, batteries, whatever. Soak it up, then dish it out when I have to.
You can see why fans concluded that Kevin must be some kind of mutant to have such powers, since even in the Ben 10 universe where it's very common for people to have strange abilities, it doesn't seem to be the norm, as most people are just regular people. But like I also mentioned earlier, Alien Force decided to retcon that and say that these powers were the result of human beings and aliens having children together, which doesn't work at all. But that's besides the point. Kevin being part alien might not sound like it changes a lot, but it does cause its own problems within the original series continuity. The biggest issue the Osmosian retcon introduced was tying Kevin's mental well-being to absorbing energy. Basically, whenever Kevin absorbs energy, it causes him to go insane and crazy, which is why he was so unstable in the classic series. It wasn't cause, he was an 11-year-old growing up on the harsh streets of New York all on his own and being called a freak by a bunch of other kids in a gang. No, it was cause he was absorbing energy when he didn't know he wasn't supposed to. I have a lot of problems with this retcon, but one of the biggest issues I take with it is how it basically took away all agency from Kevin as a character. Basically, none of his decisions in the classic series mattered, because he wasn't in control, he was just crazy. So all the evil things he did aren't really his fault anymore. So no one can really hold that against him now. Which I get was sort of the intent, but it kind of makes scenes from classic less compelling and interesting. Take for example one of my favorite scenes with 11-year-old Kevin.
Still trying to be a goody two-shoes, Ben? Let me guess. You just want to help me.
You had plenty of chances to get help, but you always messed it up. This time, you're getting what you deserve.
That scene and the scene where Kevin actually explains why he's doing all this in the same episode are tied to me. But the reason I said this one was my favorite was because I love the way Ben as a character acted here. Ben handles this in the most mature way any human, 10-year-old or not, can. He's already tried reaching out to Kevin before, and he knows that Kevin won't accept help and won't get help on his own. So now Ben has to deliver justice himself. And when Kevin seems to have lost his powers in this episode and hits forearms dead on and Ben has a chance to end it all, Ben does the super responsible thing and leaves Kevin be, knowing that nothing good can come out of attacking him anymore.
Get back here and fight, Tennyson! I'm not through with you yet!
But I'm through with you. You're not worth it. You never were.
Now that's maturity. He leaves and just offers a few words. No speeches, no tantrum, no rage. He doesn't even throw a fit like Daredevil or Batman would when confronting Joker or Kingpin. He leaves Kevin to either be picked up by the authorities or to go back on the run, thinking that he's been depowered. Now that's maturity. But, of course, this scene has now been ruined because of the Alien Force retcon. With the idea that Kevin absorbing energy is what makes him crazy, it makes Ben's speech to him really unfair. Because it's not Kevin's fault that he did any of this. All of Kevin's choices and what led up to this moment and after this moment are no longer in his control because of this retcon. But Omniverse thankfully figures out how to fix this pretty easily. See, while absorbing energy still makes Kevin crazy, Omniverse rewrites it so that 11-year-old Kevin was still a bad person, likely due to growing up on the streets and all the other stuff I mentioned. It's just that absorbing energy sends him over the line into the crazy over-the-top villain from the classic series. Omniverse also provides another great reason in Proctor Cervantes for Kevin to have eventually become a good guy. Cervantes finds Kevin in the Null Void, and begins using him in experiments to give the Rooters their powers. He also starts preparing Kevin for something called the Oncoming Storm, which is eventually revealed to be Ben Tennyson himself. Cervantes eventually twists Kevin's mind through lies and manipulation, or maybe even his powers if you want to go that far, even though that's not really implied. But he does all this to convince Kevin that he was actually the good guy and that Ben was the bad guy who misused his powers and turned him into a freak. It makes sense that the 11-year-old who already blamed Ben for his condition is even more enraged now and is quick to eat up the propaganda that Cervantes is handing him. But the genius thing this does is shifts Kevin's already shaky morality a little. Now instead of being a full-blown villain, he's more of an anti-hero, doing dirty deeds for Cervantes, and he definitely feels more like one as well. He justifies all the bad stuff he does as getting payback on Ben, the person who ruined his life essentially. It's a perfect way to write an 11-year-old Kevin slowly becoming a good guy, and makes perfect sense when you look at it from his perspective. Alright guys, this video's getting way too long. We're already at 18 minutes and I still haven't talked about Proctor Cervantes, so I'm gonna do something that I've never done before. I'm splitting this video into 2 parts. I'm gonna have the second part up as soon as I can, although that still might take a while, since I'm moving back to college really soon and kind of wanted to chill out on these last couple days. I'm afraid I can't fully finish this video. Really sorry, I didn't expect to talk so long about the Rooters arc. I really expected this to be a shorter video, but looks like I have more to say about the Rooters arc than I thought. Make sure you subscribe to see the second part. See you guys in the next video that hopefully will come out soon.